Hi everyone. Thanks for taking a few minutes to watch this Catch Engineering virtual safety meeting. Today we're covering two core related training topics that all employees need to understand. First, our emergency response program roles and responsibilities. Second, the formal hazard assessment process and hazard identification. Both training videos already include their own introductions, so this quick opening is just to connect the training to our Catch-specific updates and explain what you need to do after you've watched. If you have questions after the videos, you can reach out to Hartley or any of the HSC members. Co-chairs are Lokesh and Hartley. Members are Lisa, Travis, and Paul. Alright, we're going to start with the ERP video. This is a core requirement. Everyone needs to know what to do in an emergency, who is in what role, and what responsibilities apply to workers, supervisors, and management. Here are the current ERP roles. First aider is Lisa, with Paul as the alternate. Fire warden is Lokesh, with Lisa as the alternate. Our muster location is the Catholic Board of Education parking lot at 5 Ave and 9 St. Now we'll watch the ERP training video. Hello and welcome to Emergency Response Training. When an alarm sounds, every second matters, and every one of us has a part to play. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the key roles, their responsibilities, and exactly how we work together to keep our workplace and each other safe. These roles are outlined in the organization's emergency response plan. First, let's zoom out. Think of an emergency response like a relay race. Each runner has a defined lane and a baton to carry. If anyone drops the baton, the whole team slows down. Our baton is life safety, and our runners are the people filling specific roles laid out in our emergency response plan. At the top of the relay are employers and senior management. They have overall responsibility to ensure the organization has the resources needed to respond effectively. In other words, they clear the track so everyone else can run. This includes ensuring appropriate equipment and training are available, coordinating with legal and human resources as required, and managing communications, including with the media when needed. Employers and senior management also support the emergency response process during and after an incident, and they review emergency response procedures at least annually to ensure they remain effective. Managers and supervisors are responsible for supporting emergency response activities within their areas. They ensure workers understand emergency procedures, participate in drills, and follow the emergency response plan. Managers and supervisors also ensure emergencies are reported promptly, and that required information is communicated to the appropriate personnel. If you're hosting a visitor when the alarm sounds, you automatically become the visitor's assistant. Your responsibility is simple but crucial. Escort your guest to the muster station and provide their name to the fire warden for attendance. Remember, guests won't know our exits or procedures. You're their lifeline. Our first aid personnel are trained to provide immediate care. They keep their certifications current, bring first aid kits to the scene, stabilize injuries, and stay with the patient until paramedics arrive. If you're a certified first aider, make sure your kit is stocked and your CPR skills are fresh. The fire warden directs evacuation efforts. When the alarm sounds, they don their red hard hat, make sure every employee evacuates by the correct route, sweep rooms, close doors, and become the point of contact for the fire department. They also assist anyone with limited mobility and decide, in coordination with authorities, when it's safe to re-enter. If you are the first person to notice a fire, a chemical spill, or another emergency, you instantly become a first responder. Your first tasks are to activate the alarm, call 911, and pass accurate details to the fire warden and management. Guide arriving firefighters to the incident if it's safe, and, if an injured coworker is present, begin first aid while someone else fetches additional help. Finally, every employee, including you, has baseline duties. Assist the fire warden, follow instructions calmly, proceed to the muster station, make sure you're accounted for, and never leave that area until the all clear is given. Participation in drills isn't optional, it's rehearsal for the moment we hope never comes. Let's walk through a scenario. Imagine a small fire starts in the break room from a microwave. A worker notices smoke and flames. The worker activates the alarm right away, calls 911, and reports the location and what they are seeing. The worker then evacuates using the nearest safe route, goes directly to the muster station, and waits to be accounted for. If the worker is hosting a visitor, the worker escorts the visitor to the muster station and provides the visitor's name for attendance. Managers and supervisors respond by directing workers to evacuate calmly, confirming their area is being cleared, and ensuring anyone who needs assistance is supported. They communicate the situation and any known details to the fire warden and to employers and senior management, and they help confirm that workers from their area are accounted for at the muster station. The fire warden begins evacuation coordination by directing the evacuation route, completing sweeps where it is safe to do so, and closing doors as required. The fire warden becomes the point of contact for emergency responders on arrival and provides critical information, including the incident location and attendance status. The fire warden also coordinates assistance for anyone with limited mobility and follows direction from authorities on re-entry. First aid personnel position themselves at the muster station or at a safe staging area, ready to provide care if needed. If there is an injured worker, first aid personnel provide immediate care within their training and stay with the patient until paramedics arrive. They ensure first aid equipment is available and used appropriately. Employers and senior management ensure the overall response is supported. They confirm emergency services have been contacted, ensure needed resources are available, coordinate internal communications, and connect with legal and human resources as required. They also ensure any required notifications, documentation, and follow-up actions are completed after the incident, and they support any staffing or operational decisions needed during and after the response. Once authorities declare the area safe, re-entry occurs only when directed through the fire warden and management, and only after workers are accounted for and instructions are communicated. In less than 2 minutes, everyone knows where to go, who to report to, and what information to share. That's the power of clearly defined roles. Here is your personal checklist. Number 1. Know your role. If you're unsure, ask your supervisor today. 2. Review the evacuation map. Memorize 2 exit routes from your usual workspace. 3. Save emergency numbers. Store 911 and the internal safety line in your phone. 4. Keep calm under pressure. Panic spreads. Composure contains. 5. Participate in drills. Each drill is a dress rehearsal for real safety. Emergency response works best when everyone understands and carries out their responsibilities. Whether you're a senior manager approving budgets or an employee guiding a guest to safety, your actions matter. By understanding and owning your responsibilities, you protect your colleagues, our visitors, and the future of our company. If you have questions or concerns, speak with your supervisor, safety representative, or your health and safety committee. Thank you for committing to learn, review, and reinforce our emergency response plan. Stay alert, stay prepared, and together, let's stay safe. Next is our formal hazard assessment training. The HSC committee has already reviewed and updated the completed formal hazard assessments, including administration, site, and travel. But everyone needs to understand what formal hazard assessments are, why we create them, how to create them, and when they need to be reviewed or revised. We'll also cover site-specific or field-level hazard assessments and the different types of hazards, so you know what to watch for and can identify them when they arise. Now we'll watch the training video. Welcome to the Formal Hazard Assessment Training, your guide to creating a safer, more compliant workplace while reducing the risk of injuries, legal penalties, and downtime. No matter what industry you work in, hazards are everywhere. A fall from a scaffold, exposure to hazardous chemicals, or repetitive strain from poor ergonomics. These are just a few examples of risks that, if left uncontrolled, can lead to serious injuries or even fatalities. Every day, workers in construction, manufacturing, healthcare, retail, and even office environments face real dangers. A missing guardrail, an unstable load, or an improperly set up desk can cause long-term injuries, or worse. That's why formal hazard assessments are essential. They help us identify, evaluate, and control hazards before incidents happen, not after. Let's look at some real-world examples. Imagine a construction worker using scaffolding without guardrails. What hazards do you see? If you notice the missing guardrails, improper PPE, or an unstable platform, you're already thinking like a safety professional. Even in an office setting, poor ergonomics can lead to chronic pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, and lost productivity. A hazard assessment would identify these risks and recommend wrist supports, adjustable chairs, and regular stretch breaks. By the end of this course, you'll be able to understand why hazard assessments are important, define what a formal hazard assessment is, know key terms like hazard, risk, control, and hierarchy of control, recognize the difference between formal hazard assessments and site-specific or field-level assessments. Remember, hazard assessments are proactive. They're like seat belts. You don't wait for a crash to put one on. By completing this training, you'll gain the skills and confidence to identify hazards, assess risk, and implement the most effective controls, no matter what environment you're in. Let's get started. To understand why hazard assessments are required by law, we have to go back to a tragic event that changed Canadian workplace safety forever. This story begins in 1992 in a coal mining town in Nova Scotia. At the Westray mine, a methane gas explosion killed 26 miners underground. The explosion was sudden, but the warning signs had been there for weeks. Employees, union officials, and even government safety inspectors raised concerns about unsafe conditions, but very few changes were made. And because of that inaction, 26 lives were lost. After the explosion, there was public outrage. But despite the clear failures in leadership and safety practices, no one from the company or management team was held criminally responsible. This led to a Royal Commission of Inquiry. It made 74 recommendations calling for stronger legal accountability for workplace safety. One of those recommendations, Recommendation 73, led directly to a change in Canadian law. That change was Bill C-45, also known as the Westray Bill. In March 2004, Bill C-45 officially amended the Canadian Criminal Code. It introduced Section 217.1, which reads, "Everyone who undertakes or has the authority to direct how another person does work or performs a task is under a legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent bodily harm to that person or any other person arising from that work or task." That means if you're a supervisor, manager, or employer, and you have the authority to direct someone's work, you are legally required to protect them from harm. The law also expanded the definition of organization to include corporations and their representatives, making them criminally liable for negligence or unsafe practices. The Westray tragedy reminded the entire country what's at stake when safety is ignored, and Bill C-45 made sure that employers and supervisors would be held accountable going forward. But legal accountability is only part of the picture. Let's talk about how this applies directly to your work site and the day-to-day responsibilities you have under Alberta law. Under Alberta's Occupational Health and Safety Code, Part 2 focuses specifically on hazard assessment, elimination, and control. Here's what it says. Section 7 Bower 1. Employers must assess a work site to identify all existing and potential hazards before work begins. Section 7.2. Employers must prepare a report of the assessment results and outline how the hazards will be controlled or eliminated. This means hazard assessments aren't optional. They are legally required as part of every employer's due diligence. In addition to the legal code, hazard assessments are a core requirement for achieving and maintaining your certificate of recognition. Certifying partners like AASP, ACSA, and Energy Safety Canada expect employers to make hazard assessments part of an ongoing process, review and update assessments regularly, use assessments to identify risks, and implement effective controls. This not only protects workers, it strengthens your safety program as a whole. And remember, hazard assessments are not one and done. Formal hazard assessments are to be created, reviewed, and revised on a predetermined frequency, which for most companies is annually to ensure hazard assessments remain up to date. they must be updated. When new operations, work processes, equipment, materials, or products are introduced or modified. When changes are made to the operation or work-related processes that may introduce new hazards. When site-specific hazard assessments, inspections, or investigations identify hazards that were not previously recognized or not included in the formal hazard assessment. In response to inspection and investigation results that identify new or emerging hazards. It's a continuous process, and it's how we stay ahead of risk. Now that we understand the importance of workplace hazard assessments, let's take a deeper look at what they actually are and how they work. A hazard assessment is the process of identifying, evaluating, and controlling hazards before they cause harm. But not all hazard assessments are the same. In Alberta, there are two primary types of hazard assessments: formal hazard assessments and site-specific or field-level hazard assessments. A formal hazard assessment, or FHA, is a structured, company-wide evaluation of all jobs and tasks performed in the workplace. It takes a big-picture approach, identifying hazards that exist under typical working conditions. This type of assessment is documented, reviewed annually, and updated whenever workplace conditions change. One of the biggest advantages of formal hazard assessments is that you can implement the most effective controls, like elimination, substitution, or engineering controls, which aren't always available once workers are already on site. In contrast, a site-specific or field-level hazard assessment is done on location. It focuses on hazards that arise from unique conditions, such as a new task, weather changes, or a one-time event. These are typically done daily, before work begins, or when something unusual is introduced. Let's look at how both of these assessments show up in different industries. In construction, a formal assessment might identify risks like falls, excavation hazards, or electrical dangers. A site-specific assessment could account for changing weather, unstable ground, or newly installed power lines. In warehouses and retail, a formal assessment would evaluate forklift safety, lifting hazards, and fire risks. Even in offices, formal assessments address ergonomics, slips, trips, and fire evacuation plans. But a site-specific one might be needed before an office reconfiguration or a large event. Regardless of your workplace, hazard assessments are more than just a legal requirement. They are one of the most effective tools for preventing injuries, reducing claims, and improving overall safety. Think of a hazard assessment like a vehicle inspection. You don't wait for your brakes to fail before checking them. And you shouldn't wait for an injury to start evaluating your worksite risks. Now let's make sure we're clear on some key terms, because they often get confused. A hazard is a situation, condition, or behavior that has the potential to cause injury or loss. For example, a wet floor or exposed wire. Risk is the likelihood and potential consequence of that hazard causing harm. In other words, how likely is it that the hazard will cause something bad? And how bad would it be? And here's a very common mix-up. Many people confuse a hazard with a hazard outcome. A hazard is the source of potential harm, for example, an icy pathway. The hazard outcome is what might happen as a result, like slipping, falling, or suffering an injury. Consider slips, trips, and falls. These are actually the result of a hazardous condition, or in other words, an outcome caused by a hazard such as icy pathways, wet floors, or cluttered walkways. Understanding the difference between the cause and the outcome helps ensure your hazard assessments are clear, accurate, and effective. Let's do a quick knowledge check. Imagine you're a warehouse worker, and a shipment arrives with pallets stacked higher than usual. What would you do? Would you assume it's fine because no one's been hurt before? Or would you recognize the need for a site-specific hazard assessment? If you chose the second option, you're already thinking like a safety professional. Hazard assessments aren't just about compliance. They're about protecting yourself and your coworkers. By now, you can see that hazard assessments are more than a checklist. They're a critical tool for keeping people safe, preventing injuries, and protecting your workplace from legal and financial risks. But here's something just as important to remember. Hazard assessments shouldn't be done in isolation. In fact, Some of the most valuable insights about workplace hazards come from the people doing the work every single day. Your input ensures that the assessment reflects real-world conditions, not just what's written in a policy. Now that we understand the importance of hazard assessments, let's go through the step-by-step process of conducting a formal hazard assessment. This process includes 8 key steps, each designed to help you systematically identify, assess, and control hazards in your workplace. The first step is to create a comprehensive list of all the jobs and tasks performed in your workplace. We call this the job inventory. The question to ask is simple. What do your people actually do? Every organization is different, so your job inventory will vary depending on your industry and daily operations. Let's say you run a supermarket. Your job inventory might include deli counter staff, bakers, butchers, grocery clerks, buyers, baggers, inventory managers. This visual example shows how different roles contribute to the same work environment, each with their own tasks, tools, and potential hazards. Next, we'll move on to step 2. Now that we've built out our job inventory, the next step in the formal hazard assessment process is Step 2. Identify job tasks. Once you know what roles exist in your organization, you need to break each job down into its specific tasks. Let's look at a visual example. Instead of just listing grocery clerk, we break it down into clear tasks such as scanning groceries, bagging groceries, stocking shelves, processing payments, assisting customers, sweeping or cleaning up spills. Each of these tasks carries its own unique set of potential hazards, and that's why this step is so important. Job, it's time for step 3, identify the hazards. This is where we examine each task and ask, what could go wrong? We identify hazards based on the tasks performed, not just the job title. For example, for the task stocking shelves, hazards might include lifting heavy items, climbing ladders, slips or trips from spilled product. A hazard is any condition, behavior, or situation that has the potential to cause injury, illness, or damage. Hazards are typically broken down into 2 main types. Health hazards, which cause illness, often over a long period of time. These are typically chronic, developing from prolonged exposure. Safety hazards, which cause immediate injury or harm. These are usually acute and happen suddenly, like slips, trips, or falls. To better identify and control hazards, we group them into 6 main categories. 1. Physical hazards. These include lifting heavy loads, slippery surfaces, noise and vibration, poor lighting, working at heights or around moving machinery, temperature extremes. Violence. These are often the most visible hazards and typically lead to injuries like cuts, bruises, strains, or falls. 2. Chemical hazards. These come from exposure to substances like cleaning products, fumes or vapors, gases like carbon monoxide, solvents, or paints. Byproducts from industrial processes. Chemical hazards can cause skin irritation, respiratory issues, or long-term illness with prolonged exposure. 3. Biological hazards. Biological hazards are living organisms, or substances produced by living organisms, that pose a threat to health. These include viruses, bacteria, and fungi molds. Bodily fluids and sewage animal or pest waste, pandemic-related hazards like influenza. These are especially common in healthcare, laboratory, or waste management environments. 4. Psychological hazards, also referred to as psychosocial. These are often invisible but can have serious impacts on health and performance. Examples include harassment and bullying, chronic stress, mental fatigue, effects from shift work or isolation. These hazards can affect morale, productivity, and even physical health if not properly addressed. Each of these hazard categories can exist in any workplace, sometimes even overlapping. Now that you've identified the hazards associated with each job task, it's time for step 4. Assess the risk levels. So what is risk? Risk is simply a hazard, measured. In other words, we're taking the hazard and evaluating how dangerous it is based on 3 factors. Each hazard is assessed using the following criteria: likelihood or probability. How likely is it that the hazard will actually cause harm? Severity. How serious would the consequences be if an incident occurred? Frequency of exposure. How often are workers exposed to the hazard? Each of these is ranked on a scale from 1 to 5 and then multiplied together to produce a pre-control risk rating anywhere from 1 to 125. Now that you've identified the hazards and assessed their risk levels, it's time for Step 5, implementing control measures. To do this, we use something called the hierarchy of controls. The hierarchy of controls is a system for choosing the most effective way to reduce risk, starting from the most effective and moving down to the least effective. Let's walk through each level. 1. Elimination or substitution. The most effective control is to completely remove the hazard. This could mean eliminating the task entirely. For example, outsourcing a dangerous process to a safer alternative. If elimination isn't possible, can you replace the hazard with something less dangerous? An example would be using a non-toxic chemical in place of a hazardous one. 2. Engineering controls. These are physical changes to the workplace that isolate people from the hazard. This might include machine guards, safety interlocks, ventilation systems, or gas detection sensors. The key advantage? Engineering controls don't rely on workers doing something right, they're built into the system. 3. Administrative controls. These involve changes to the way people work, such as implementing policies or standard operating procedures, scheduling rotations to limit exposure, posting safety signage, conducting training and safety meetings. These are effective, but they rely on human behavior, which can be unpredictable. 4. Personal protective equipment, PPE. This is the last line of defense. PPE doesn't eliminate the hazard. It simply protects the worker if something goes wrong. Examples include glove safety glasses, steel-toed boots, coveralls, hearing protection, high-visibility vests, respirators. In many situations, more than one control will be needed. Some controls work together as a system. For example, an engineering control might require training to operate it safely. PPE requires policies, signage, and training to ensure it's used properly. Multiple layers of controls are often combined to maximize protection. The key takeaway? Don't rely on just one solution, especially if it's lower on the hierarchy. The goal is to eliminate or reduce the hazard as much as possible at the source. And most importantly, hazard assessments are not one and done. They must be reviewed and revised on a predetermined frequency, usually annually. Updates are required when new operations, work processes, equipment, or materials are introduced. Changes are made to the workplace that affect safety. Site-specific assessments or inspections identify new hazards. Incidents, injuries, or audit findings indicate gaps in safety measures. Congratulations! You've just completed the formal hazard assessment training. You now have the knowledge and tools to identify hazards across multiple categories, assess risk levels using frequency, probability, and severity. Apply the hierarchy of controls to reduce or eliminate risks. Remember, hazard assessments aren't just paperwork. They're living documents, meant to be used, discussed, and updated as your workplace evolves. They're about people, protecting your coworkers, reducing injuries, meeting legal obligations, and fostering a culture where safety is everyone's responsibility. We are going to wrap up this safety meeting. After this meeting, an email will be sent out to all staff with the completed formal hazard assessments. Please review them. If you feel anything is missing, unclear, or needs to be added, email me back. Input from everyone matters. There will also be a short test that will include both trainings, the ERP training and the formal hazard assessment training. Please complete the test and email it back. The link to the training videos will be shared as well, so you can review them again if needed, especially before the core audit, since interview questions will include ERP responsibilities and the hazard assessment process. If you have any questions now, you can ask any of the HSC members, Lokesh, Hartley, Lisa, Travis, or Paul, or email them. Thanks for your time and for helping keep Catch safe and audit ready.